Let's see. Something's up. Not quite sure what. Have a look at live, see what's going on. Hey folks on the other end, give us a shout if you can hear or see us, because having some issues with the back end here. Let's see. Quite sure what.
I just turned on the audio for a second. I think they can hear you.
Oh, fabulous. Great. Hey, Brianna's here.
Woo!
Great. All right, I'm going to switch us over. So apparently Streamlabs is telling me that there's something wrong. I don't believe it though. So I'm just gonna pop that down and hope for the best here. So here, let's switch over. All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you are all doing well today. I am Melody, and this is my channel called A World to Win, where I discuss political theory, history, and related topics through a Marxist framework. In this stream, we're going to be reading and talking about the 2008 book, The Democrats: A Critical History by Lance Selfa. We'll be using the updated 2012 edition. If you would like to follow along, it is available from Haymarket Books at haymarketbooks.org. If you need a digital copy, please reach out to one of us. We'll be happy to provide a link to it. Joining me today is my good comrade Simba, who has joined me on our previous educational streams on the German Revolution and on the book called On New Terrain, which we did actually over a year ago, and that's kind of blowing my mind right now. We did that last September. So you'll notice we are down 2 members of our usual gang, but fear not, they will be back. Kyle and Izzy just have some prior obligations today, so they couldn't join us, so it's just going to be Simba and I today. So what's this book about, and why are we covering it to begin with? So as the 2020 election draws near, many liberals are having a conniption about how we have to, big scare quotes, support their awful candidate Joe Biden because Trump is the singular evil who's screwing up America, and if we just get rid of him, everything will be better. Hello, MLUK. Hello, Dave.
Oh, Dave's in the chat? What's up,
yeah,
Dave?
Hey. Yeah, we're keeping it a little bit more casual this time, so this is more like tea and beer with the comrades and a little bit less strict than our previous stream, because the book we're covering is a little bit less academic, a little bit more general audience. I am actually enjoying a lovely cup of chai tea with a little splash of heavy whipping cream. That's my secret. I don't just put regular cream. I put heavy whipping cream in it. That's my original sin. So, anyhow, where did I leave off in my script here? The liberals are having a conniption about how we have to support Joe Biden because even if we don't like him, because Trump is the singular evil who's screwing up America, and if we get rid of him, everything will be better. You may not like Joe Biden, they say, but Trump is so much worse. So much worse, excuse me. Which, I will note, is a common tactic of abusers, to say how lucky you have it and that the alternative is so much worse, and it's just so, count your lucky stars that things aren't worse. The Democratic Party of today is known by many activists as the graveyard of social movements. Why is that? we're told that the Democrats stand for reproductive rights, for LGBTQ plus rights, that they stand with the fight against racial oppression. But they're all too eager to shake hands and sit at the table to negotiate those issues with people who have no intention of ever giving an inch. This shows that their commitments to these causes are paper thin at best and cynical aesthetic politics at worst. What's at play here is a political phenomenon known as controlled opposition, a sort of safety release valve that diverts the anger at the unjust aspects of the capitalist system into channels which the system can then neutralize as a threat. The Democrats sometimes embrace the tamer slogans of social movements like Black Lives Matter, but distance themselves from anything that even remotely smacks of militancy. They extol the virtues of so-called peaceful protest, but are quick to condemn rioting, so-called, because it's bad PR for them and it scares off their deep-pocketed corporate donors. And every so often, we even see certain so-called progressive or democratic socialists seemingly rise to prominence in the party, like Bernie Sanders, AOC, and that whole crowd. But the structure of the party ultimately marginalizes them, and they end up playing the role of sheepdogs to attract young and left-leaning voters into the party, providing kind of a left-wing cover for the party's core mission, which is to serve and protect the interests of their big business backers. We previously explored this and related ideas in our stream on New Terrain by Kim Moody, as I mentioned earlier, which is archived on our channel, and you can go watch it if you'd like. If you feel like engaged by the topics that we cover today, we welcome you to go check it out. So to just wrap up my introduction here, the Democrats' critical history is not a comprehensive history of the party, but seeks to illuminate how it developed into the role it now serves as a controlled opposition party. In studying this book with all of you, we hope to make the clear case for why socialists, communists, anarchists, and so on should stay far, far away from this bourgeois party and recognize it for the quicksand trap that it is. So yeah, that's my spiel. That's my introduction. Before we kind of go any further, I would like to give my comrade an opportunity to introduce themselves. So yeah, Simba, please tell the world what's up.
Hello, I'm a person on the internet with a lot of opinions. You can find me on Twitter at YoItSimba, People's Commissar of Pride Rock. Currently, that's my official position. Occasionally, I do YouTube stuff on my YouTube channel, YoItSimba. I'm currently in a stable living situation, so I'm probably going to start back up with that. I guess I should say that I personally am not a Marxist, like as far as tendencies go. I'm not a Marxist-Leninist per se, but typically with historical and theoretical debates, I side with them, and on some occasions, I can understand the Maoist point of view. So that's sort of the perspective I'm coming at this situation from.
Yeah, thank you. I also definitely, that's what I describe myself as, some kind of Marxist-Leninist. I'm not part of any particular party, and I'm a member of an organization, but I'm not a distinctly Marxist-Leninist one. I'm a member of the Portland chapter of Democratic Socialists of America, and I think this is actually a really important conversation to be having, especially within the context of DSA's rising prominence, because DSA was kind of conceived of back in the 80s as this, Michael Harrington, one of the co-founders, described it as the politics of the possible. So it was fundamentally a project to kind of do this exact kind of sheepdogging that we're talking about. And I think it's interesting that in this current period, the political life of socialism, I think, has taken on contours that Harrington really. I mean, like Harrington is just so conservative by the standards of even the kind of more moderate wing of today's DSA. So I think talking about the Democrats, a critical history, this book is really important because it really kind of illuminates the contradictions of trying to basically force our way into a party that really serves to neutralize us as a threat to the system. So with that being said, we're going to be talking about the first 4 chapters of this book today, and unlike our previous streams, if you were around for them, we did a very academic book called The German Revolution by Pierre Brouet, and it was definitely, our structure was very formal because this book is a book by a historian written for academic historians, so we had to kind of go over it very systematically, very methodically. And so think of this as being definitely a little bit more of a fireside chat kind of discussion. I mean, like, the material's still, serious, and, we intend to have a serious discussion here, but we're not applying kind of the same kind of rigor that we did to our previous discussion on the German Revolution. So we're going to keep things a little bit more conversational, a little bit more casual. As always, though, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and we'll try to kind of answer the questions that we know how to answer, and write down the ones that we don't know how to answer, and try to figure them out at a later time. So that being said, let's get into this. Let's get into this book. So,
cool.
Yeah. Simba, do you have anything to say to comment on that?
Sorry, Maggie. Yeah. Not quite. I mean, like, I'm ready to just start talking about the book, and if we happen to come across a situation where sources past 2012 or whatever it is, like, that kind of thing is warranted, then we should do that.
Yeah, for sure.
This book was written in 2008, and then it was updated, I think, in 2012. The 2012 version. Yeah, that's the one that we're reading right now. So the author didn't have, like, the benefit of being able to see the entire Obama presidency, but definitely understood that Obama is significantly more milquetoast than his campaign made him out to be.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, one of the first things that Selfa talks about in chapter 1 is how different the idea of party membership is, and the whole structure of the parties in the United States. So in a lot of capitalist democracies, if you want to be a member of a party, you actually have to, like, sign up on a website and maybe pay dues or something. Like, that's definitely, if you want to be a part of the Labour Party in the UK, that's definitely how that works. You sign up, you pay dues, and you get you basically there's some level of democracy within the party. My understanding is that the Labour Party is kind of riven with its own problems in that way, but nonetheless, there's at least there's a greater degree of democracy than there is with regards to the Democratic Party in the United States, for which, as Selfa points out, you don't really sign up to be a member in that way. If you vote Democrat, you're a Democrat. It's a little bit more like sports team identification. Like, you're not a right, like in my state, we have kind of 2 big college teams. We got the Ducks and the Beavers, and if you're a Ducks supporter, like, you're not actually literally a member of the team. You just, like, bought their sports jerseys and stuff, right? And so kind of similarly to that, In the case of the Democratic Party, you're a Democrat if you vote Democrat and put a lawn sign out or whatever.
Yeah. And in some states, depending on where you're registering to vote, you might have to, like, on your voter registration, say I'm registering as a Democrat.
Right.
So that you can vote in, like, the Democratic primary or the Republican primary, whatever.
Sure.
So that's, like, the most commitment you'll ever have to make, basically.
Yeah, and of course, give us money. Donate to our campaign. Right. And sign up for our endless email lists and Zoom meetings. But yeah, as Salfa points out, he says, it is more accurate to, this is on page 12 if you'd like to follow along, second paragraph on page 12. It is more accurate to describe the Democratic Party as something closer to what mainstream political scientist Maurice Duverger, I hope I'm saying that right, described as a caucus cadre party of notables. In this type of party, a vestige of pre-20th century forms, small groups of prominent people, politicians and business leaders, hire themselves activists, i.e. a cadre, to maintain the mechanisms of the party, getting out the vote, distributing patronage. These prominent people, the notables, aren't interested in involving more people or expanding democratic participation. In fact, they view voters and constituents as passive objects of the party's operation. The cadre is motivated to work for the party less because of a commitment to shared values or ideology than for career advancement. The possibility that they could climb the ranks of the party to become part of the circle of notables. Yeah, so I think that that's a really kind of key passage from chapter 1. And we definitely kind of see this, like, to the extent that I've seen in real life something like this play out, is that, and we'll get to this in talking about how the Democrats, kind of co-opt social movements, but you'll frequently see kind of so-called movement leaders in real existing social movements. They'll kind of work their way into kind of becoming, they'll collect clout basically of some variety, either through giving good speeches or actually, I mean, in many cases they are actually doing good work, but they either by their own ambition end up being kind of either by the kind of their own ambition or because somebody notices them, get whipped, get kind of, I guess probably recruited or corralled by somebody from the Democratic Party. And this kind of stuff happens in broad daylight. This is not like some, conspiracy theory. Like, this is the kind of thing where this, you can see this is a kind of like it's the business cycle of the nonprofit industrial complex, right?
Right.
And it's a way in which the party will find, people who are kind of, legitimately or otherwise, they've gained some street cred, some prominence with real social movements, and they'll use them as kind of a voice to neutralize the actual movement as a real threat, and basically turn people's energies towards the electoral system instead of street protests or direct actions or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Simba, go ahead. You want to reflect on that?
Yeah, definitely. One very interesting example of that I've found in my days, actually not from this book, but from a different book, was Bobby Lee Rush, who is a former member of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party, who spent his college days, doing party work and communicating with people and trying to spread, ideas of national liberation and stuff like that. But he dropped out, I think, in like 1971 or something, and got like very involved in electoral politics. and now I believe he's a representative in Chicago, or a place in like some, what do you call it? Oh gosh, I forgot what you would call it. But basically, like he's a representative who represents some random part of Chicago or whatever. And
Like an
this,
alderman, or
huh?
like an alderman, or something like that.
No, a region
Oh,
district. It's a district. Yeah,
dist-
his district is somewhere in
district rep.
Chicago. Might be. Um, yeah. So he started off as like a young radical, was disillusioned and kind of scared because of COINTELPRO. Completely understandable. I get that. Started like doing electoral party, electoral like party politics kind of work. And earlier this year, he was campaigning for Michael Bloomberg, which I think is hilarious because that's like, I don't know what a switch. But he's been a careerist for about 20, 30 years. No, wait, 30, 40 years by now. And that's the kind of thing that the Democratic Party is like designed to do, basically.
Yeah, absolutely right. And we, funny enough, this really is not something that we cover a whole lot in the first 4 chapters of this book, but it's very much connected.
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely something that we'll be covering, like, really in a lot of detail in chapter 5, which is we'll be starting to read next session. But it's all, I think it's important to note that this is deeply all stuff that's like very deeply connected. These are not things that can be necessarily thought of as separate. I think the Democrats are able to kind of project this aura of we're for the people by kind of, paying at least some superficial attention to these movements, and kind of like, jumping on them at the last possible second, right? Like, back in 2014, I don't think hardly a single Democrat would have said Black Lives Matter. I think, the movement was like way too, like, considered by the mainstream as way too militant and too fringe, right? And
Right.
now
Yeah.
and now every bougie liberal has a Black Lives Matter placard in their window in the gentrified neighborhood that they blah blah blah. Everybody knows this story.
And I'm sure in 2 or 3 years they'll be saying defund the police or something also.
Right. It's like that the copying homework meme.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
here, just change it a little so it doesn't look like you cheated. Except they like
Yeah.
completely water it down and turn it into this, like, basically like lifestyle slogan type thing.
They're like, we got radical politics at home.
Yeah, it's more like that meme. Radical politics at home, right? um, and right, and then the other thing that we really wanted to talk about in this stream was kind of the what's considered by many kind of modern day social, democratic socialists or social democrats, whatever you call it, as kind of the high watermark, or like the ideal, which is Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. And what this chapter really puts lie to is that the New Deal was really not this like radical overhaul. Like, it did some very like big programs, and it really was in a lot of ways like a game changer. But at the same time, what this chapter really illuminates is that this was really an effort by the government and big business to kind of keep the torches and pitchforks at bay. I think it's very important to remember that at this time in the mid 30s, right, the Russian Revolution was not like a distant memory. It was a very still a very widely respected thing of the international working class, and right, like anti-communism, like we think of the Red Scare as being like a 50s thing, but like, oh my gosh, it was there's never not been a Red Scare in America, basically.
Yeah.
But anyhow, right, so like the phrase, which I think I've variously heard attributed to either John F. Kennedy or John Kenneth Galbraith, which is when reform from above becomes impossible, revolution from below becomes inevitable, right? I'm actually not sure who that's attributed to. I've heard it attributed to both Galbraith and Kennedy, but anyhow, right. So the New Deal was constructed to kind of placate organized labor, to and a lot of New Deal programs, including, believe it or not, the Social Security Act, were modeled after the private insurance programs of many companies at the time. And it was, I believe, Gerard Swope and what was the other name? I think General Motors CEO or something. Anyhow, and Walter Teagle of, I'm not recalling what company he represented right off the
That
top
was
of my head.
Standard Oil Company.
Standard
New
Oil.
Jersey. Yeah.
Yeah, so Standard Oil of New Jersey both played a very prominent role in kind of shaping the New Deal as a policy. And right, so I think something kind of important we need to point out here, which is like, we're not saying that like the New Deal was a bad thing. Like, I think it's a very good thing that we have Social Security and like other things that are kind of a legacy of the New Deal. But at the same time, like we really need to recognize, their context, how and why they were put into place, and who put them into place. Right? This was not like some, grand social democratic vision put into place by working class agency. This was the kings in their castles seeing the torches and pitchforks up at the gates and going, oh shit, we better toss some bread to the peasants, or else we're gonna have our heads on pikes in a minute here.
Yeah, and the CIO specifically had two strategies during and after the New Deal to get rid of communists in the CIO. The CIO had like tons of communists in leadership, and many of them down below. But basically, during and after the New Deal, they would either find out who the communists are and like figure out a way to like fire them or get rid of them, or like just do something to make them not a leader in whatever union they were in. Or they would find like a government program job for them to like make a stable living off of, so they just didn't hate America that much. They just really wanted them to like be in a comfortable enough position that they didn't complain and stopped waving the red flag. Or maybe they would call themselves communists, but like kind of forget about like the actual radical part. So that would like quite literally line up with I guess the definition of petite bourgeoisie, like at the time, like move these workers into a position that is like
labor aristocracy.
Labor aristocracy. My bad. Like move like labor into a position that is like comfortable and where you don't have to advocate for yourself as much.
Right, and I actually wanted to just make a connection real quick to our previous stream on the German Revolution, because I think that's kind of, despite the fact that the German Social Democratic Party is a world away from the Democratic Party in the U.S., but the German Social Democratic Party, there was definitely a very kind of similar pipeline of like, if you're a full-time party activist, you actually have the potential to be in a pretty comfortable position, right? And that was kind of where the bedrock base of revisionism within that party was revisionism or reformism, depending on what vernacular you want to use. But right. But I think another thing, I think we really, as a point of comparison, the Social Democratic Party of Germany is very different from the Democratic Party in the United States in this way, which is that the Democratic Party, the Social Democratic Party in Germany, at least foundationally, was by and for working class people. It was an institution that developed through the kind of the lifeblood of working class people in Germany. And even though it, drifted in a more reformist, revisionist direction over the course of its life, the whole foundation of its politics were socialistic, and I think the byproduct of that being that the people who really upheld the vision of its founding principles went on to split off and form the Independent Social Democratic Party, and then later the Communist Party, and so on, right? But we see no such parallel with the Democratic Party in the United States. And I think that's the other thing that's really critical that our book here gets into, which is the foundation of the Democratic Party. And I think there's some parts here that are really worth quoting at length, right? And before I get into that, the Democratic Party, from its inception, was the party of slave owners and planters, right? So, the world's cotton industry, and the institution of slavery are really bound up with this, the history of this party, right? And these things seem distant now, right? And I think we frequently kind of get right-wing kind of bad faith critiques saying oh, the Democrats are the party of the KKK, and they're superficially correct. Right. Because, but they're when they do that, they're really trying to obviate the greater issue. But anyhow, the foundation of this. Sorry, go ahead. What?
Just in a very dishonest way.
Yeah, they're correct, but in this very narrow and dishonest way, right? I'm just going to go ahead and read part of this book, a passage or several passages, kind of out loud to really make this clear, because I don't think it's real obvious to see this point of comparison without really understanding the origins of this party. So this is on page 39 in chapter 2, if you'd like to follow along. Okay. The origins of the modern Democratic Party. Just about every year, and certainly during every election year, local Democratic Party organizations around the country hold Jefferson-Jackson dinners in honor of Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson, presidents who are considered in many ways to be the founders of the Democratic Party. The organization that became the Democratic Party actually began life as the Democratic Republican Party, founded in 1792, and it was also known as the Republican Party. This is going to get real confusing because the two parties today are called the Democratic and Republican parties. And Selfa jokes that this just makes them all the more indistinguishable. It emerged from the anti-federalist wing of President George Washington's administration, the first government under the U.S. Constitution. The Democratic Republicans, led by Jefferson, organized in opposition to a treaty with Great Britain negotiated by John Jay in 1794, and transformed the party into a loose grouping of politicians and interests into a more self-conscious political party. The details of the fight over Jay's treaty are less important than how it polarized the Washington administration and led to the formation, around Jefferson and James Madison, of the parliamentary and electoral predecessor of today's Democratic Party. After 1824, the Democratic Republican Party became simply known as the Democrats. It held under its banner a heterogeneous coalition of forces, but its core was the Southern slaveholding aristocracy that Jefferson and Madison embodied. And then he quotes his political economist and Marxist historian Harry Braverman, who is one of my intellectual senpais. Very much somebody who I read and look up to a lot. Braverman is really at the core of a lot of my analysis of contemporary capitalism. So he quotes him saying, "We must recall that the policy of the Jeffersonian Party had been to take the reins of the national government and draw into cooperation with the planters sections of the northern capitalist class. So successful had this policy been that the bourgeois Federalist Party was virtually dissolved in the Jeffersonian Party during the administrations of Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and the Second Adams. The Eastern planters grew accustomed in this so-called era of good feeling to secure their rule by means of this alliance at the cost of some concessions to the New England merchant capitalists. However, the fundamental antagonism between the two systems could not forever be repressed. In the North, an aggressive manufacturing bourgeoisie was supplanting the merchant class. Paralleling this was a rise of aggressive cotton slaveocracy in the Southwest. Here were the chief contenders in the coming irrepressible conflict." Right. So that's all I wanted to quote for the moment. So we see in this Marxist analysis of the origins of this party that it's not. I think we're frequently kind of fed this story that that's so ideological and that the parties are really aligned around certain belief systems. But as Marxists, we know that belief systems are rooted in relations between classes, between groups that have differing levels of power. Right. And I think that, when we try to think of the history of the Democratic and Republican parties, I think frequently the way that it's framed is, especially in the modern context, is big government versus small government. Right. That's how especially the right-wingers like to frame it. The Democrats want big government and the Republicans want small government. And that's how it's always been.
Which is hilarious.
It's so hilariously wrong. Hello, Jen Graves. Welcome. Hello to everyone who's joined us since we started about half an hour ago, or about 40 minutes ago now, I guess. We are, for those just joining us now, we are discussing the book The Democrats: A Critical History by Lance Selfa. So I just wanted to give the conversation a little bit of time to breathe, kind of ask folks in the chat, what are your thoughts on all this? And Simba, if you'd like to take the mic for a minute, I'm fine with that too. Let's keep this casual and conversational and have a good time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Thomas Jefferson had a big part in the American Revolution, which was largely about expanding past the Allegheny Mountains to the west. And Andrew Jackson is the very famous Trail of Tears guy, which that was another westward expansion. And if those two folks are, if we could see any trend throughout the entirety of the Democratic Party, as well as the Republican Party, but we're talking about the Democrats right now, you can very obviously see that the Democratic Party is incredibly imperialistic. You can't take the imperialism out of the Democrats because their major contributors are all benefit from imperialism as well. I mean, America is the heart of the imperial machine that is capitalism. Take for example that George Bush, when he was president, there were 2 wars that America was really actively involved in. And under Obama, he blew that up to 7, I think it was. He got involved with Libya, deposing Muammar Gaddafi. He was very active with doing arms trades to Saudi Arabia. And that's like the best case scenario. I mean, Joe Biden voted for the Iraq War as well. Lyndon B. Johnson, the guy who signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, I believe, also started the Vietnam War and had a one-term presidency as a result of it. Just for example, I mean, so that's absolutely a dimension that we have to think about. I think that in the book there was a really good quote about that, but I'm just gonna confirm that.
Also, Wilson, World War I,
Oh yeah,
Democrat.
I forgot that he's a Democrat. Yeah,
And
he's a
there's
Democrat.
that very infamous quote from Wilson that I'm just itching to find because it's so good. Oh man, I have to find it. It's one of my favorite quotes about American imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
You, yeah, you go ahead. I'm looking it up.
Let's not forget one of the biggest contributions that everybody forgets about of the New Deal president FDR, and this is a quote from the book way later in than where we read. But FDR and his administration set up the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the United Nations ongoing tools of American imperialism. After Truman ordered atomic bombs dropped on Japan, he went on to create the National Security Council, the CIA, and the Defense Department. The Truman Doctrine authorized U.S. troops to intervene anywhere to defend free enterprise and against communism. The myth makers laud Kennedy for creating the Peace Corps while ignoring that he also created the Green Berets.
Mic drop.
So, yeah. I mean, if it says anything about, like if anything like ties together like the entire argument, it would be that FDR specifically like created the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, and Kennedy did the Green Berets, which is just hilarious. It's just, if you take imperialism like out of the conversation, you're not giving a complete answer or a complete analysis of the Democrats.
Right.
There are also sorry to like rant a bit, but there are
No, you're
also
good.
some cool. There are some Democrats who are somewhat sympathetic to, for example, Puerto Rico becoming a state. The thing is that a lot of people miss with this is that making Puerto Rico a state could like superficially be good. And yes, like that's sort of a favorable policy in Puerto Rico, depending on who you ask. But that kind of takes out of the equation the other option, which is self-determination for Puerto Rico. Like, do they even want to be a territory? Maybe they want to be their own independent country, as the Cuban revolutionary Jose Marti wanted for Puerto Rico. And there are these like little situations where it's very clear that as the author of the book that we're talking about said, as he said, the Democrats, like the top highest tier of the Democratic Party, they look at voters and constituencies as objects. Like if voters are demanding something, they find a way to like fit that into their party program rather than fitting their party program to meet the needs or desires of what people want, which is the exact opposite of, say, something like Mass Line, where the party is supposed to be like responsive and communicate in conversation, I guess, with people. Like Democrats, and I mean more generally American political parties, very much are like, here's our platform, vote for me, and that's kind of it. That's where the conversation stops.
Yeah, no, that's all incredibly relevant, and I did find the quote of, that sums up the Democrats and imperialism really well. It's on. I am skipping ahead a little bit in this book, but it's only because I have read this book probably half a dozen times, and I just know it in and out. But I promise we'll cover this more in depth in future stream when we actually talk about this chapter. So this is on page 166 in the 2012 edition. If you'd like to follow along, the bottom of page 166. Actually, no, I'm going to read something else from the same page just for a minute. No Democrat put a presidential stamp on U.S. empire until Woodrow Wilson became president in 1913. Wilson ordered military interventions in more countries and stationed troops for longer periods than either uh, Teddy Roosevelt or Roosevelt's Republican successor, William Howard Taft. In particular, Wilson turned the Caribbean Sea into a virtual American lake. In the years before U.S. intervention in the First World War, Wilson dispatched Marines to Mexico, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Panama, Honduras, and Guatemala. In 1914, U.S. troops landed in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, on a mission to collect from Haitian custom houses a debt owed to the National City Bank. When the Haitians rose up against this attack on their sovereignty, the United States launched a full-scale occupation that lasted until 1934. When the United States finally withdrew from Haiti, it left behind a U.S.-trained military whose successors continued to terrorize the Haitian population for the rest of the century. So that's a quote in and of itself. It's not even the quote that I had intended to share to begin with, but I just wanted to give some space to that if anybody wants to comment, or Simba, if you wanted to say anything either.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if we zoom ahead about 100 years, let's. I mean, like the Democratic Party's foreign policy on Latin America is disastrous. For example, Obama, and this had to be revealed through WikiLeaks. Also, Obama's State Department fought like tooth and nail to lower the minimum wage in Haiti. I think they cut it in half, or managed to, or something like that. Obama's State Department also had a huge hand in deposing the democratically elected leader in Honduras. I
Mm-hmm.
think that was like 2010 or something.
Yeah.
And here's a weird example. Last year, Evo Morales tweeted out like, "Congratulations to Bernie Sanders for like declaring his bid for the presidency," or something like that. And I think at some point, Bernie Sanders said something to the effect of, the Jeanine Áñez, like hopefully under the Jeanine Áñez administration, like democracy will be restored to Bolivia or something like that.
Yeah. Jeanine Áñez, for those who don't know, is the white fascist current illegitimate president of Bolivia.
Mm-hmm. Their elections are happening today.
Oh, geez. Oh.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Sort of off topic, but I mean, the absolute most like progressive person who has ever been in the Democratic Party is saying that Maduro and Evo Morales are dictators and have no intention of slowing down the imperialist death machine, basically.
Yeah, and AFRICOM, the African Command, I can't remember what it's called, was created. Oh, I'm going to need to get fact checked on this, but I think it was created under Bush and dramatically expanded under Obama. There's going to be a recurring theme, and we're going to have to do a little bit of explanation because this book was, again, published in 2012 and really doesn't kind of understand the full depth of how the Obama administration, and this is important because creepy Joe Biden is running on the Obama legacy. He's been touting that as his street cred this whole time. And I think we really have to stress that, the Obama administration not only continued, but escalated many of the existing kind of authoritarian or fascistic structures that were put into place under the Bush administration, such as the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, and the drone program, and extrajudicial assassinations overseas, and expand the powers of the National Security Administration for domestic spying. Right, so there's just like these things that I think we're really seeing coming to a head now under the Trump administration in a very like in your face way. I think those things, like, folks were still calling them out under the Obama administration, but I think now that there is somebody who's such an openly fascistic, figure occupying that space, I think there's kind of a, maybe those things are coming into perspective in a new way, and the folks who are, kind of more maybe partisan Democrats in those years saw the bankruptcy. I mean, I hope to God that's what's happening, that they seeing the bankruptcy of this party, which really acts in concert with the Republicans in creating a more and more intense, settler, colonial, fascistic, imperialist state. Um, and but yeah, I think stressing that. I think Marx has this great line of describing. I think this may be in the economic and philosophic manuscripts or the Communist Manifesto. I can't recall which, just offhand. But he describes the bourgeoisie as being like a band of warring brothers, right? They have. It's not like they compete, right? That's the nature of capitalism. Capitalists compete with each other, but at the same time, as a class, they have common interests, and they will happily, collaborate to make sure that those interests are protected. And then Marx also, and I'm almost certain that this is in the Communist Manifesto, says, or maybe this is Engels. I'm sorry, I'm mixing. I don't have all these references ready to hand. He says, the modern executive is but a committee for the common management of the affairs of the bourgeoisie. What he means by the modern executive is the modern state. Right, and so that this extends into our concepts here of party, because party and state are very intertwined in American history, right? They're not kind of these separate institutions as they are in a lot of other kind of capitalist democracies. Anyhow, so I did want to get around to the Wilson quote, which I think is really kind of gives us the skeleton key, gives us the master key to the rest of the history of the Democratic Party with regards to imperialism. And so here it is, bottom of page 166. Since trade ignores national boundaries and the manufacturer insists on having the world as a market, the flag of his nation must follow him, and the doors of nations which are closed against him must be battered down. Concessions obtained by financiers must be safeguarded by ministers of state, even if the sovereignty of unwilling nations be outraged in the process. Colonies must be obtained or planted in order that no useful corner of the world may be overlooked or left unused. So that gives you a little taste of what we're going to be getting into when we get to chapter, I think this is chapter 7? Chapter 9? Oh, I'm wrong, chapter 6. So we'll be covering that in our next stream, like in depth, but like, I don't think, again, like this book is really kind of written in a way that's like each chapter is very much connected to the other chapters, because this book is not like a college history textbook where it talks about first it talks about this period and then that period. It doesn't follow this kind of linear historical trajectory. It talks about the evolution of the different institutions around and in this party.
Thinking Zoomer is saying some stuff that we could definitely address. For example, they understood that Bernie Sanders was doing an imperialism or whatever, but said, I don't know how it could be different. He's in the Democratic Party. And what we're trying to emphasize here is that the Democratic Party is a machine with gears and screws, nuts, bolts, all of that stuff. Like, it's a moving organism, like a moving political organism. And if you're in it, you've gotta play your part. You gotta do the thing that you're supposed to do. And so as long as Bernie Sanders or other uh, politicians are in the party, they're going to have to make concessions like that, and they're gonna have to have a public appearance that complies to, um, a certain kind of party platform or whatever. Like there is like
There's
a
a
binding,
party line of sorts.
yeah, a party line of sorts.
Yeah,
Um,
and the other thing that that they said is one of them is an explicitly fascist party, while the other are still liberals. See, I don't think I agree with that. I think that, especially like as a speaking as a trans woman and speaking as a Jew, if you have a dinner party, and there's 9 liberals sitting down to have a discussion with one Nazi, what you really have is 10 Nazis. And that's exactly what the role of the Democrats has been in this kind of cumulative process really especially over the last 40 years. Which has seen the Democrats become increasingly, like, again, like as we've been emphasizing throughout this whole discussion, that the Democrats have never really not been playing this role, but at the same time, like especially over the last 40 or so years, they have been playing an increasingly complicit or even active role in the expansion of domestic policing powers, in the expansion of, foreign wars, and really, passivity when it comes to like even those domestic issues, which they supposedly are so in favor of. They offer the most milquetoast and kind of capitulating defense of those issues. And I don't think that, and maybe this is my hot take, I don't think they can be meaningfully distinguished as one being fascist and one being non-fascist.
I agree. I
That's my
agree.
hot take.
Like, absolutely. Like when people say like, "Oh, vote for Biden. At least he's not a." And by the way, I'm not telling anybody don't vote or whatever. Like you do you whatever you want to do with your ballot, or if you want to sit at home, whatever. Like I don't care. But when people say like, "Oh, vote for Biden," like at least he's not a fascist or something, it's like a segregationist. You're going to tell me like somebody who was at one point a segregationist like is not at least a little bit fascistic or sympathetic to fascism?
Or
The
the dude,
crime bill guy?
yeah, the dude
Like
who like thought Reagan wasn't being hardcore enough about the war on crime.
right, exactly. Like I you're at like he's absolutely complicit in the proliferation of American fascism. Like that there's no question about it. Like the thing about anti-fascist activism is like being able to define who is explicitly a fascist, or like it's like when somebody's doing a fascism and they're doing it repeatedly, like that's the person you target. It doesn't matter if they have like some kind of outward appearance as being decent or whatever, like if they're eloquent, well spoken. What matters is like, is fascism being done? Is it being made popular? If so, by who? And target those people. So I kind of have an explicit policy of not voting for people who take part in fascism. Also, creepy old rapists. That's another thing. I'm not going to vote for
Yeah,
creepy.
for real. And like
So,
here's the other thing is the great American socialist Eugene V. Debs has a very memorable quote that I shared on Twitter the other day, which is, "I would rather vote for something that I want and not get it than vote for something that I don't want and get it."
mhm,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, and I think that the anarchist criticism of participating in bourgeois electoral politics, I'm very sympathetic to. And that take is that if you vote for like a bourgeois party, you're going to be conditioned to like want to vote for that party again, and that's going to be like your praxis. Like
Right.
participating in elections, we know it's a racket, and if you like are continuously okay in an unprincipled way about voting for a bourgeois politician over and over and over,
Right.
um, then like how meaningful is your activism? Like we know it's
Absolutely.
obvious. know?
Yeah, and like here's where I think that Marxist and anarchist politics really overlap, and like I actually really want to clarify something here in that how Marxists view participation in bourgeois electoral institutions, which is that it's very circumstantial. I think maybe the anarchist conception is a little bit more like blanket, and anarchists feel free to
Yeah.
correct me here. But I think that the anarchist critique is that don't put your foot in that door no matter what, right? Don't you know uh, but I think for Marxists, it's a little bit more like circumstantial, and like if there is
Right.
an opportunity to say run for office, and even if you're not going to win, you're going to probably attract a bunch of people to your politics, and you have this like mode to engage with people who are politically enfranchised in some way. But the thing that I think is really critical to understand about that argument in the context of American politics is that the people who have been historically and currently politically enfranchised are not attracted to socialist politics at all. In fact, quite the opposite. And
Yeah.
the circumstances in which Marxists have participated in bourgeois electoral institutions have been situations in which those institutions are like basically incredibly vulnerable, like as in the case of kind of the end of the Tsarist Empire, right? Like the Dumas, the state legislatures that were the bourgeois, basically like the bourgeois parliaments that were instituted by the czars at the end of the Russian Empire, um, were like kind of the signs of a dying system, right? And the Bolsheviks and the other socialists at the time saw an opportunity to kind of have a platform, and not necessarily like they didn't think they were going to like institute socialism by just like getting seats in the Duma. It wasn't about that. And here's the thing that the kind of I guess what we have to kind of correct in the American situation is that we really don't have that same kind of power dynamic here. What we have is an incredibly kind of like hermetically sealed almost system that has insulated itself so strongly against any kind of social change from below that really kind of in the words of I'm paraphrasing Rosa Luxemburg here, that the victory of a socialist candidate within this kind of bourgeois system is not a victory of socialism over bourgeois democracy, but a victory for bourgeois democracy over socialism. And just to comment real quick, and then Simba, I'm going to ask for you to do something for me in a minute, which is just to kind of hold the mic because I have to refill my tea. Um, there's a lot of hot tea being spilled here. If you catch my drift. But I just wanted to reflect. I just wanted to reflect on the kind of the train of thought that Thinking Zoomer got us talking about, in the context of what fascism is, which party, if which party's fascist, which one isn't. And I think Simba, what you said is really right on. And back in, I think the 30s, the Bulgarian communist Georgy Dimitrov said, fascism does not arise overnight with the election of a fascist politician. Rather, fascism comes to power in stages, beginning with attacks on the democratic rights of working people, the imprisonment of communists and trade unionists, hostility to national minorities and immigrants, and the gradual erosion of democratic institutions. Right, so fascism, and I think the only way that I really particularly disagree with Dimitrov is that I think that stages is maybe not the greatest way to conceive of it. Like, I think it's a little bit more fluid, and it happens kind of in a dialectic with the struggle and resistance against fascism and just general oppression of the capitalist system. But yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of bring to the table here, and I need to refill my tea, so I'm going to pass the mic over to Simba for just a few minutes here.
Yeah, Dave just quoted, I think that was the president of Tanzania, in saying the United States is also a one-party state, but with typical American extravagance, they have two of them. And that's like dead on, in my opinion. I understand thinking Zoomer. If you don't agree, that's perfectly fine. And I'm more than happy to hear out your argument. DM me if you want. But it's very important to note, and the author of the book says this. Was it Julius Nyare? It might have been Julius Nyare. But anyway, the author of the book says this at the very beginning. We live in a bourgeois state, and we have multiple political parties, but they're both bourgeois parties, so they're not like the state itself is unaffected. You don't get to vote on that, but you can vote for which group of people you want to govern the bourgeois state. So inevitably, we come to a situation where it's in. Oh, and also America's a settler colonial country, so there's that contradiction. So we arrive at a situation where the protection of property rights is very, very important and has to be defended. Both parties are bourgeois, and so like you kind of don't like. There's a lot of stuff you don't get to vote on. You don't get to vote on imperialism. You don't get to vote on aggression against China and anti-communism. Like right now, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are trying like desperately to out anti-communism each other, like saying that one or the other is like an agent of China and stuff. And there was one Joe Biden campaign ad that was like explicitly xenophobic and stuff. Also, the legwork our media puts in to make these superficial differences between the two parties seem concrete and inherent is astronomical. Before radicalizing, I wanted to work in political media. Yeah, it does. I mean, like, and it's on behalf of the advertisers, and the advertisers are, giant companies that are owned by even bigger companies who donate tons and tons of money to political campaigns. So it's just, I mean, there's given that there's so much that you can't vote on, and the protection of private property is like the number one thing that bourgeois states do. I don't really see how you could disconnect the Democratic Party completely in a qualitative way from fascism. That is my humble opinion. I think that Mel would probably agree with me on that. Working in political media sucks, and I wish I had read or watched like some Michael Parenti or something before this. I had a really busy day because he sums up a whole lot of things about how terrible the political media is. Like he does that really, really well. And yes, actually, the media is a huge part of the state. Bree, it is what's called an intellectual state apparatus. As opposed
Ideological state apparatus. Sorry,
ideological.
couldn't help myself. Yeah.
No, you're good. You're
Oh,
good.
Althusser. I got all excited about that because I was on I was a guest on the podcast Revolutionary Left Radio back in I think January actually earlier this year, and we talked about Althusser and the ideological state apparatuses. Anyhow, sorry, I didn't mean to like totally derail you there. I just got excited. I got excited when I heard the words.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
still making my tea, so I'll be right back. Sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, when I ramble, I tend to be like wrong about little stuff like that. But yeah, an ideological state apparatus. So that would be like a school, a church, a news media channel, or something that very clearly displays a particular message in service of a certain kind of state. And it's interesting. Like while the riots in Michigan were happening earlier this year, there were a bunch of reporters. I think it was from CNN, which is, I would probably call it a pretty liberal media outlet or a slight liberal media outlet. there were a bunch of news reporters, one of which got arrested at on the site of a riot for reasons that I totally forgot. But CNN was completely incapable of criticizing the police in any meaningful way, while their own reporter was getting arrested by them for just standing there. And it was kind of sad to see. It was sad to see, honestly.
Yeah.
UK.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry. Go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna say, for one thing, I'm getting a little bit of feedback from your end, so I'm just letting you know.
Oh, gotcha.
But I think it's really important that we circle back to talking about, actually, especially because of this tremendous uprising that's been happening this year, and also, stretching. I mean, really, the last. Especially since the Ferguson uprisings in 2014, and before that, Occupy Wall Street. I think that we really have to center discussion on of the role that the Democrats play in supporting, like, not just passively but actively supporting the police state, and how, like, for example, Obama very directly cracked down on Occupy Wall Street and the Ferguson uprisings, and the Baltimore uprising in the subsequent year. um, and yeah, I think they're and still went after Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning pretty aggressively. So I think there's a lot that we need to talk about, and some of this is covered in Selfa's book, but not all of it. Just again, because Obama, he really only covers the first term of Obama in here, and he kind of alludes to some of this stuff, but there's no, yeah. It's again, it's limited by the fact that it was published in 2012, and I don't think we shouldn't criticize it for that. We just recognize that it's a limitation.
Yeah, exactly. Also, my house is kind of noisy as of the current moment because somebody is fixing, I think, a table or something. So I'm muting myself when I'm not talking. But yeah, definitely. Okay, I think so. It's 7:44 now. How much longer did you want to go on, or do you think we kind
I
of?
think. I mean, like, I think that we still have plenty to talk about. I don't want to, keep us going on continuing tangents if there's, no need for it. But I think we are having an interesting conversation. I don't want to cut it short, kind of artificially. I think we've had some important questions posed by the chat that I think we've, no, we haven't necessarily answered them. I think we've certainly kind of clarified our position in terms of, like, and just to as kind of anecdotally, uh, I wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page here, talking about, when I say we, I refer to kind of the overall consensus that we established during our individual streams, right? Like, me and my co-hosts are still kind of different people with, our own different ideological and kind of political orientation, right? And so when I say we, I don't necessarily actually speak for all four of us in terms of our, various ideological positions. I'm, an ML. Simba has their own program, and Izzy is an anarchist, and Kyle is a wobbly. Actually, all three of my other co-hosts are wobblies. I'm the only non-wobbly here. I should be, though. I keep meaning to sign up. I'm definitely a big supporter of the wobblies, but I just wanted to take a moment and to say that I certainly don't speak for the whole gang. This is, when I say we, I mean in a very loose sense.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll stick around until 8. So
Sure.
what more do we need to address from the first 4 chapters?
I think maybe let's talk about um, hmm, definitely we should spend some time talking about Chapter 3 and the rise of the New Democrats, and kind of the very sharp rightward turn that the Democrats take in the 80s and 90s, and uh, definitely like Clinton's undoing of the New Deal, parts of the New Deal, and page 79, feeding the prison industrial complex. Um, I think because that talks about the crime bill, and that's on page, again, 79, if you want to pull it up. Um, Thinking Zoomer asks, do we vote? I can only speak for myself, but it depends. Depends on the issue. There's a local ballot measure, for example, that I'm supporting very actively right now. So I wouldn't say that I just like don't ever vote in anything. It's just I'm very selective about where I put my attention and energy in terms of electoral politics, and I really. My overall effort is to really decenter elections from my praxis, because I think that, to put it in terms of a wobbly slogan, direct action gets the goods, right? Like voting on, in certain circumstances, I think can be, you know, helpful, but I again like that. I feel like I'm already overselling it by saying that, because I'm just so um, selective about where I put my energy, and I always, when I say that, I'm always careful to follow that up with, please, for the love of God, um, do direct action, bring food to people, get in the way, right? Like get in like in terms of like going on strike, or putting your uh, you know sit-ins and that kind of thing, right? Anyhow, that's my voting spiel.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I very often vote on like local issues and local stuff, but I don't typically vote for. I mean, I've had very few opportunities to vote for president, but like I did vote in the 2016 election. I don't like I can't vote in this upcoming election um, because of an issue with my address and registering because I moved. Um, but I wouldn't vote if I could. So yeah, or I wouldn't vote for president if I could. I think that there is like kind of an important local thing popping up, and I definitely don't donate my money to political campaigns because like, what if the person doesn't win? Then where did my money go? Really, So if somebody posts a GoFundMe for this or that important thing, then yeah, sure. But if it's a campaign for presidency, like or for anything actually, like I don't usually ever.
Yeah, actually, I think that leads into it. It's not exactly what I wanted to talk about next, but it's actually a really important part of this first couple of chapters here, which is Selfa talks about where the funding for the Democratic Party comes from,
Mhm.
and it is overwhelmingly from corporate donors, not from everyday people, and not from organized labor. They get um, they do get contributions from the larger labor unions, but uh, the rank and file of those unions really doesn't have much say in how that money gets apportioned anyhow. But um, yeah, uh, the amount of money that comes from organized labor that goes to the Democratic Party is overwhelmingly small, compared to the amount that they get from their corporate donors. Um,
Mhm.
and I
And it's
think
been
that
decreasing as a percentage since the 70s.
that's right. That's right. That's absolutely right. And we talked about this in a bit on our Kim Moody stream, where where he talks about how, kind of going along with that, the Democratic Party has really shifted its marketing strategy, and I mean marketing in terms of like vote getting. The Democrats have shifted away from trying to appeal to working class voters, and like are increasingly kind of jostling for the middle class white suburban vote. Um, Right, and like that, nothing was more evident in that than the 2018 so-called blue wave, right? Like those are all uh, the counties that flipped were all suburban, typically middle class or upper middle class districts, right? These were not like working class districts at all for the most part. There were some exceptions to that rule, but yeah, the Democrats have really focused their marketing, their vote getting on securing the votes of kind of moderate, upper middle class white people for the most part, and shifted away from getting grassroots support from, unions and labor organizers. But anyhow, the thing that I wanted to get to is page 79, the feeding the prison industrial complex. I swear I can. Actually, Simba, do you want to read this part? I read the part earlier. Do you want to read this part?
Yeah. Sorry, which part?
Page 79, feeding the prison
79.
feeding the prison industrial complex.
Yeah, sure. Starting with while Clinton and Gore.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. While Clinton and Gore presided over a retreat of government responsibility to meet human needs, the administration continuously expanded the government's policing of every aspect of life. 2/3 of congressional Democrats supported Clinton-Gore's 1994 Omnibus Crime Control Act. This $33 billion monstrosity expanded the use of federal death penalty to 6 times, appropriated $10 billion for a vast expansion of prison building, and offered money to localities to hire 100,000 additional police officers. In 1996, Clinton's Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act greatly curtailed death row prisoners' habeas corpus appeals and established arbitrary time limits on death row appeals. On Clinton's watch, the U.S. prison population grew from about 1.3 million to nearly 2 million, and the number of executions jumped to 98 in 1999, its highest level in 4 decades.
Thank you.
Wowee.
Yeah. Right. So,
Dang.
right. Like, I think we've really, and maybe this is kind of where we can wrap up the discussion. And I'm not like pressing us to like just end things right now. And I think chat has been having some interesting stuff come up that we can talk about now and talk about next time. But I think really the overarching theme that we've really that I think ties today's stream together is that the Democrats are really part and parcel of the kind of greater overall political system here, and that they really have no qualms about kind of expanding the police state on the home front and expanding the reach of imperialism in the rest of the world. Right? So there's the kind of their deep imbrication with the kind of mechanics of settler colonial capitalism, both in their origins as a, the party of the slaveocracy and planter class, and in their kind of continuing role in pulling the levers of American imperialism. And furthermore, I think we've done a really we started this conversation talking about how they have come to develop into this role of controlled opposition, right? They are, they can kind of get away with pretending to be the voice of the voiceless, right? They, people like Bernie Sanders and AOC can kind of, give them the cover that they need to then pursue aggressively, austerity politics and imperialism and so on, right? Like it really serves as a very effective mask for their reactionary. What their agenda is fundamentally reactionary, and yeah, and they get away with it because they let themselves play the role of the good guys against the bad guys, the Republicans. But the reality, I think, we've seen from reading this book, and that we are I think both Simba and I, as activists, have probably experienced, like in the real world, is that they play this role of distracting, and kind of diffusing the energy of social movements. And yeah, so uh, I think that pretty much sums up everything that we covered today, going from the origins of the party in the slave owning class and the planters, to the kind of slide towards authoritarianism and police state politics of the 80s and 90s, and to the present. Simba, is there anything that you wanted to kind of wrap up with, or any reflections that came out of today's conversations? You're muted, comrade.
I know we threw around a lot, and thank you, Mel. I know we threw around like a lot of examples of all kinds of stuff as far back as the early 19th century up until now. But the thing that I would like for everybody to take away is that as leftists, we have to look at these things as a system. And yes, the Democratic Party is in itself kind of a system, but it operates within a larger system of capital, imperialism, etc. That it has to make concessions to. Or actually, I shouldn't even put it that way. It has a function, and that function forces people who are further left than the Democratic Party to make concessions continuously, like over and over. So I am not saying that if you vote for a Democrat in this or that election, you're like not a leftist or whatever. But we would all be better off finding some kind of, not even electoral route, but way to get people informed and understand that the function of the Democratic Party is necessarily against our interest as radicals. And yeah, and that makes a whole lot, like understanding a whole lot of things about America in general, like a whole lot easier.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have put it better myself. That was really excellent, Simba. I just wanted to take a moment and say that if you liked what we have going on today, please consider supporting my channel financially. You can go over to patreon.com/aworldtowin, and you can pledge as little as $1 a month. It really helps me out a lot. And if you can't do that, I understand money is tight right now for a lot of folks. Totally get that. Please give me a follow on Twitter. I'm at aworldtowin1. Make sure to like the video, comment on the video after it's posted, and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you get notifications. And if you found, even if you disagreed with things that were said today, please share this video, talk, and use it as use the material that we got here, that we covered here, as a conversation starter, because these are really like important issues that that don't get discussed because the Democrats are just kind of assumed to be the opposition party, and we just don't. That tends to just kind of be an article of faith in this country. And I think especially a lot of folks like watching from the outside of the United States, it's a little mind-boggling to see how the Democratic Party just so effectively dominates and controls the left, basically. And so not just the left, like socialists, but like social movements in general, struggles for civil rights, and so on. Right. So in future episodes, like I said earlier, just to wrap things up here, we're going to be joined again by our regular co-hosts, LaborKyle and Izzy Does Everything. Unfortunately, they couldn't be with us today. I am seeing a lot of new folks in the chat today, and I just wanted to say welcome. And we are definitely like right, like I have lots of disagreement in the chat, and that's fine. Actually, just don't be jerks to each other. And I know again, I know that I can kind of maybe come off as a little bit harsh or blunt, and so yeah, I can tone that back a little bit, but I really do want these sessions to be more educational than confrontational. I do want to challenge existing assumptions about the nature of the Democratic Party and of kind of just political struggle more generally. But I do have some points that I'm really not willing to give up in that regard. But I think that really like reading through and understanding this book is a really critical jumping off point for building a socialist movement in the United States that can not only fight but also win. It can actually, topple the power structure as it is. And I think with that, we are going to wrap things up. I guess I want to give chat just a moment to I'm seeing a lot of really, like I said, I'm not a lot of new folks here today. And I just, again, wanted to make sure to say hello to everybody. There's a lot of folks that do recognize, like Eve Coley and Brianna's Library. Just wanted to take a moment to also say that Brianna's Library, please go subscribe to her channel. She's amazing. Her and I are going to be reviewing a book probably in the next month or two. No promises in terms of timeline, but we're going to be reviewing a book called The Coming of the American Behemoth, which is all about the study of the period of the interwar years in America and the forming of fascism here. And we're going to be talking about a lot of the things that we covered here on this stream too. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and we hope that you can all tune in to our future sessions. Our next one is going to be 2 weeks out at the same time, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, and yeah. Thank
2
you.
days before the election.
Oh boy, yeah, and
Yeah.
I just to address something real quick, people, we're inevitably going to get some feedback and be like, "Oh, why are you doing this so close to the election? It's the worst possible time." On the contrary, my friends, this is the best possible time to be criticizing the Democratic Party because they keep getting away with this shit.
Yeah,
Anyhow,
seriously.
so yeah, once again, thank you everyone.